Undercapitalized neighborhoods represent some of the last great opportunities for long-term real estate value creation. But opportunity alone isn't enough. The Ascent Project helps investors unlock that potential by delivering community-rooted programming that strengthens neighborhoods from within. It's social infrastructure strategically deployed. Learn how to partner and visit theascentproject.org to explore partnership options.
On this episode of Create the Village,
how can we bring that type of investment and amenity to the neighborhood so that people can stay within their social networks and thrive?
This is Create the Village, a podcast about the intersection of public policy and community development.
My name is 𝗥𝗰𝗵𝘁. I'm the CEO and founder of the Integral Group, a real estate company that focuses on creating value in cities and rebuilding the fabric of communities. By now, we should all know that community development isn't just about buildings. It's about people. It's about honoring legacy, confronting structural inequities, and building trust over time, block by block, relationship by relationship. Few places reflect that truth more clearly than Atlanta's historic West Side. Today we're joined by 𝗏𝗏, Chief Real Estate Officer at Westside Future Fund, a mission-driven organization committed not only to creating affordable housing, but protecting the long-standing residence and cultural identity of this deeply rooted community. In conversation with Shannon Judd, President of Integral Property Management, 𝗏𝗏 shares how Westside Future Fund is reimagining community development as a vehicle for justice, inclusion, and long-term stewardship. From pioneering anti-displacement strategies to resolving title issues that often stand in the way of generational wealth, this episode offers a powerful look at what it means to lead with purpose and to build with the community, not just in it. Let's listen in after this message from our sponsors.
In Miami, BRIC, the Black Real Estate Investment Council, is building an ecosystem where capital, development, and local opportunity converge. Powered by the Black Professionals Network, BRIC connects Miami-based investors, developers, and city leaders to advance sustainable real estate growth. Discover how this South Florida network is influencing the future of urban investment. Learn more at mybpn.org/BRIC.
Rural Enterprises is reshaping urban real estate, from mixed-use housing to office, retail, hospitality, and industrial projects, while delivering strong returns and lasting community benefits. With over $100 million in affordable housing completed and more than $1 billion in development underway, they're leading with data-driven strategies and smart partnerships. Discover how they combine asset management, capital investment, and advisory services to transform cities sustainably at ruralenterprises.com.
Well, welcome to Create the Village. Today, we're honored to be joined by 𝗏𝗏, the Chief Real Estate Officer at Westside Future Fund. 𝗏𝗏 has been leading impactful work in affordable housing on Atlanta's historic West Side, focusing on stabilizing neighborhoods and supporting legacy residents. Her work at 𝗵𝗵𝘆 provides a blueprint for community-driven development that preserves the character and identity of the communities it serves. 𝗏𝗏, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's dive into the powerful work you're leading at the Westside Future Fund.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about Westside Future Fund's mission. Could you start by telling us a bit about the mission? What drives the work that you're doing to revitalize Atlanta's historic West Side neighborhoods?
Sure. Great question. So Westside Future Fund's mission is creating a community Dr. King would be proud to call home. And that rings particularly true because it was Dr. King's last community that he lived in. Dr. Martin Luther King was living in Vine City at the time that he was assassinated. And he specifically chose to live in that neighborhood to be amongst like a mixed income community, which is what the West Side was in the 50s and 60s. Westside Future Fund's focus is compassionate and holistic community revitalization and restoration. And that is really recognizing the historical importance of the West Side to the city and to the world for what it brought in terms of, civil rights advancements and all of the things that Atlanta has, contributed to in the world fabric. So the work that we're doing is really focused on stabilizing the community, revitalizing it, and providing opportunities for legacy residents while attracting new residents to the community as well.
How does that look exactly? What are some of the efforts to stabilize?
Sure. So in terms of legacy resident retention, we have been putting several pieces in place over the past few years. The first major initiative that we did, understanding that as properties, were going to be converted into new dwellings and that new investment would occur as gentrification came to the West Side, was to ensure that legacy homeowners were able to stay in their homes and take advantage of those new amenities coming into the community. So in 2017, we launched the Anti-Displacement Tax Fund, which is property tax relief for legacy homeowners under a percentage of income in the neighborhood. So what that means is that as homeowners enroll in the program, Westside Future Fund will pay the increase in their property taxes over time. So the taxes for that homeowner are effectively frozen as of the date that they enter the program, and Westside Future Fund pays any future increases. So for instance, last week when taxes were due, we paid the city $175,000 on behalf of over 100 legacy homeowners in the West Side.
Wow. And the plan is that into perpetuity?
What we have said is that it's for 20 years, and I think that's just sort of based on our estimates of how long we might expect to see those legacy homeowners remaining in the community, understanding that many of them are seniors and, may or may not be willing their property to somebody else in heir when they pass on. But our commitment would be to make sure that we don't end our support before someone ends their residency in the neighborhood.
Awesome. So about your affordable housing goals, specifically the Our Next Chapter campaign, it's really ambitious, aiming to bring hundreds of those new affordable homes. What's the overall vision and what's the impact you're already seeing in your community?
Sure. So Our Next Chapter campaign is really based on achieving the goals that we set for affordable housing in the neighborhood in 2017. So Westside Future Fund has actually been around for almost 10 years. As of the end of this year, which is quickly approaching, we will be celebrating our 10th anniversary. And some of the initial work that we did, in addition to supporting the Westside Land Use Framework Plan, which was the rewriting of the zoning for the neighborhoods, was to set targets for what was needed in terms of affordable housing in the neighborhood as we knew new investment pressures would come in. So based on some housing assessments that were done then, we set a target for 1,500 units of rental housing at 60% AMI or less in the neighborhood. That was based on the vulnerable renter population that was in place in the neighborhood at the time. And understanding that, as new development would happen, there would be pressures potentially displacing those residents. And, we weren't going to be able to get everybody to stay in the neighborhood one for one, but that was kind of the number of units that was needed to ensure that this remained a mixed income community, even as, it was redeveloped. So to get to those 1,500 units, we took a look at other housing projects that were underway. So for instance, Integral's Scholars Landing, redevelopment, that took care of a certain number of units. We knew that Atlanta Housing also had their Herndon Square redevelopment, and then Quest Communities had several projects in their pipeline. So taking stock of all that was already in the works, and for those properties, we set a goal of Westside Future Fund creating or financing 800 units at 60% AMI or less. So we develop units by buying properties, by renovating them or building new properties, and also by financing units through our impact fund. So for all the property that we've been amassing over the past 6 years, Our Next Chapter aims to be able to build out all of that housing and also build 250 new single-family homes to increase homeownership in the neighborhoods. And that will get us to that overall neighborhood target of 1,500 units at 60% AMI or less.
Impressive. So it sounds like partnerships play a huge role in making these projects possible. What are some of the key public-private partnerships that Westside Future Fund has built, and how do they create that lasting change in the community?
Absolutely. I mean, this would not be possible without partnerships. Just to be able to cover, all of that ground and do all of the work as needed, no single organization could do it alone. And that's always been sort of a bedrock principle of how Westside Future Fund does its work. So for us, that means in terms of having financial relationships with other partners. So we have a great relationship with Atlanta Housing. They have been a really instrumental partner for us in doing this work while we're trying to serve a deeply affordable population. Being able to get those types of project-based rental assistance that allows us to really serve our mission to a population that really, cannot afford to pay a rent that is sustainable for operating a property. So we have them on the operating side. The city through Invest Atlanta has been a wonderful partner in terms of RFPing properties to us, executing long-term ground leases, and, selling us the buildings for $1 to, help to sort of defray the cost burdens of redevelopment. And then, we're starting to work with the city's Department of Grants on some CDBG and other sort of federal funds, which definitely play an important role in addition to, other locally available grant funds like the Westside TAD grants from Invest Atlanta. On the development side, we lean even more heavily into partners because we're a really small team. We have about 16 people in the organization. So, working with both single family developers, a whole, host of kind of service agencies throughout the neighborhood. We work with Atlanta Neighborhood Development Partnership on single family home development, 𝗪𝗂𝗪, which is an English Avenue-based nonprofit general contractor for both single family and multifamily, partnering, with Integral Property Management for our property management, and then also, working with Quest and Integral and Penrose, the developer of Herndon Square, to make financing opportunities available to help community-driven development take place throughout the community.
Yeah, so I love kind of the investment in the people too, and understanding that legacy of this community. So when we talk about that community-driven development, how did Westside Future Fund keep residents at the heart of that planning process? I mean, we've really talked about how y'all have gotten here and kept that resident in mind and what you were trying to attract back. But what steps does the organization take to ensure that project aligns with the community's needs and then ultimately to preserve its character?
Absolutely. Great question. I mean, I would say that any undertaking like this has to be, in alignment with the community's desires, right? That's a basic principle of doing with, not to a community. And so for us, that meant, building trust and relationships and doing a lot of listening before we started doing any development work of our own. So in 2016, 2017, even before that, we were conducting many, many, many dozens of community meetings to work through what the Westside Land Use Framework Plan would be. And so that was a process of listening, identifying, and elevating community priorities for how they want their neighborhood to look in the coming decades. What types of areas need preservation? What are those priorities? How would they like to see new development happen? Where in the neighborhoods should there be more density? Where should there be more single family character? So really taking stock of all of that and always prioritizing, what those needs and wants were. Then when it came to sort of implementing and executing on that plan, being in constant conversation with the neighborhood about sort of, what types of developments do you want to see? What size units are important to you? Being very responsive in how are we delivering on this mission that we have said that we're going to do? And then really, truly figuring out how to implement community retention. And for us, in addition to the Anti-Displacement Tax Fund, our housing initiative is based in our community retention guidelines, which essentially look at a person's ties to the community, current or former residents of the neighborhood, people who attended one of the HBCUs in the Atlanta University Center, people who attended the local APS cluster in Booker T. Washington High School, who work in the neighborhood, who have a connection to the neighborhood. We're looking for those criteria and prioritizing those people for housing. So if you have been in the community for a very long time, if you work here, if your kids go to school here, if you went to high school here, you are at the top of our list for housing. as we're selling homes, we're also trying to attract people who have those affinities to the neighborhood. So working with the Atlanta University Center faculty and staff to say, hey, wouldn't you want to live in the community where you work? Don't you want to be part of this? Come buy a house from us and become a homeowner and invest in yourself and in this community.
Sounds like you really listened to that community and the resident base and thought through the anti-displacement tax fund to ensure that the community wasn't gentrified, and really thought about the need for additional affordable units. But what are some of the other barriers or strategies you had to deploy that maybe just weren't necessarily thought about to keep those legacy residents in place? I'm just thinking outside, obviously cost everyone thinks about, and access, but what are some of the unique other things that when you guys dug deep in there, you found that there was a need for?
Yeah, great question. One thing that I think everyone is starting to become more aware of, not just in Atlanta, but throughout the country, is the issue of heirs properties, which is that houses and property are passed down through generations, often in the Black community, even more so in the white community. And of course, the West Side is vastly a majority Black residents. So properties don't get transferred through wills or through changes in deeds of ownership. It's more informal than that. And often you will find that a single home actually could have multiple different owners, brothers and sisters and cousins. And that creates real problems for families to do with properties what's best for them, whether that is selling a home and getting some benefit from that, or having a particular person own that home and be able to build their own household wealth through that. So title clearing and sort of working through some of those tangled titled issues was really a big component of the work of the Anti-Displacement Tax Fund. And it was thanks to a gift from the 𝗷𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗃 Family Foundation that we were able to do that title clearing work, and then to actually clear up any sort of liens or back taxes on the homes so that they came into the program knowing that there was clear title and full rights of ownership. So I think that was a huge thing that continues to be a need throughout the West Side and in many communities of color across the country.
Absolutely. I personally experienced that when I used to do finance back in the day, and I helped a gentleman probate a house that he had owned for so many years, but didn't actually own it on title and had no idea. And I think forward on how do we, as we help disparate population get access into home ownership that they had not been given before, bring education to our communities. So when we start to think about the services we want as we bring up our community, I think that's probably one of those services, financial education.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's heartbreaking to have to tell somebody that they don't own what they thought they owned. So to come not just with that unwelcome news, but with a solution and a path forward is really the spirit, that we want to approach all of the work that we do in.
So we know that the affordable housing work we do is difficult, and it comes with just complex challenges. So what are some of the regulatory hurdles, funding gaps, the toughest ones that Westside Future Fund specifically have had to overcome?
Yeah, many.
SHPO comes to mind, right?
SHPO does come to mind. That's right. I mean, affordable housing and, affordable housing finance are definitely not for the impatient or faint of heart. There's just a lot of hurdles that you have to clear when you're doing something that requires so much input and financing from different parties, right? For us, to your point, that looks a lot like getting through federal environmental clearance for using Atlanta Housing project-based rental assistance or CDBG federal funds. You really have to go through this extensive environmental process. And I will say one challenge that we really faced at the beginning was that HUD is set up to invest in neighborhoods of opportunity, not in neighborhoods where you have a lack of services. And so really painting the picture of how the work that Westside Future Fund and its partners are doing in the neighborhood are making this neighborhood a neighborhood of opportunity and a neighborhood of choice. That's really the very first hurdle to overcome is, how can you invest these federal funds in a way that is consistent with federal policy? And it really kind of underpins the whole effort, right? We don't want people to move out of the neighborhood to go to a better neighborhood with better schools and opportunities, that disrupts people's social networks and social fabric and their family structure and their life structure. Rather, how can we bring that type of investment and amenity to the neighborhood so that people can stay within their social networks and thrive, in the neighborhood that they have been living in? That's really a core principle for us, and something that you really have to educate people about. In terms of, sort of other challenges, I would say, doing this type of infill housing, whether it's on the multifamily side or on the single family side, is, orders of magnitude more difficult than doing a greenfield development outside of the city, right? You're having to do individual plans for single family homes because every lot is a different size, has like different conditions that it has to deal with. So it's really kind of like creating a custom home for every home that we build. And then on the apartment side, it's taking, small lots and putting them together over the course of years so that you get one site that's big enough to build, 15 to 30 to 45 units. The way our markets are set up is that we have to go out and we have to buy that property. We have to negotiate with dozens of individual investors, many of whom are not in the community. Most of them are we have to track them down. They're out of state. They don't necessarily really want to sell unless we're going to pay them, what they think they might be able to get in the future. So just, putting together that type of development plan and sticking to it is, a hurdle in and of itself.
So let's focus a little bit on the deconcentration of poverty and what some of those strategies look like. When we talk about why that was a thriving community when MLK lived there, it was the fact that it was mixed income. And we know that mixed income brings the disposable income necessary to bring the services, the resources that help a community thrive. So when you talk about acquiring enough land to build more units that might be affordable, and then if we're layering subsidy, how do we counter those arguments about instituting more concentrated poverty? How do we demonstrate the need and to balance the mixed income in the community?
Sure. Well, certainly mixed income communities is a priority of Westside Future Fund. That's actually the name of the impact area for this, is mixed income communities. And a big part of our efforts are to help bring back that mixed income neighborhood that it was in the 50s and the 60s. The way that we think about this work is balancing kind of that future state with the current state, right? Addressing some of the immediate pressures and threats of displacement with sort of where we want to go in the future. And so we think about this on an entire neighborhood scale and think about what are some of the neighborhoods in Atlanta that are the most desirable and amenity-rich neighborhoods today. Thinking of like Ansley Park over on the east side. You can live in Ansley Park and you can walk to the grocery store and entertainment and send your kids to great schools. And, if you were to go to Ansley Park now and say, hey, we would really like to build hundreds of units of affordable housing in your neighborhood so that lower income people can take advantage of all of these amenities, they would say, well, thank you, but no thank you, right? We're good. You can go build that somewhere else. And not their fault, just like that's just the way it works in neighborhoods. So our intention with sort of taking a portfolio view of all the work that we're doing and all the work that our partners are doing is that first we build the housing. We are able to, we adhere to our community retention guidelines. And then as we have addressed that urgent need, we move forward and further into a more mixed income neighborhood. So at over the long term, we anticipate that we will have approximately 600 apartments, of which somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 350 will be at 60% AMI or less, and the rest will be at 80% AMI or some higher income bracket, so that we have a mixed income, portfolio, but also tracking in the bigger neighborhood, those 1,500 units of affordable housing at 60% AMI or less, those are in an entire ecosystem of almost 3,000 units of new housing being built. So it really is a deconcentration strategy that has to address some of the urgent priorities up front.
Absolutely. So it's exciting to hear that y'all are going to hit your 10-year anniversary. And I love numbers. So I get to the point where I'm like, at 10 years, what data do you have? Where are you ready to start advertising that impact? And how do you assess it? So I'm just curious, what are some of the metrics that you've already been able to start to track and measure the success of your mission? And once you have that assessment, what's been the community feedback, right? Because sometimes what y'all see in numbers isn't necessarily what their feedback is, but hopefully it is what they feel as well as what you guys see.
Yeah, I think that for us, impact is measured in how we help the kids in the neighborhood, right? Are they achieving better educational outcomes? Are they able to graduate from high school with an education that helps them get a good paying job? Are career advancement opportunities available to them? And those things take a lot of time, right? Just being honest about that. Those outcomes are tracked over many, many years. And, some of the gains that we saw in educational outcomes and decrease in the student mobility rate, which is how many kids moved during the course of a year, which was very high in the Booker T. Washington cluster in 2016 and 2017. We had started to see some of those numbers decrease, and then COVID started. And it really kind of wiped out a lot of the progress that had been made. I think for us, some of the concrete metrics that we can look at now that give us the sense that we're going where we need to go in terms of impact and achieving those long-term outcomes are, how are we supporting and stabilizing families now? So are we effectively able to deliver units that can support, families looking at 2 and 3 bedroom units? Are we able to attract and retain new homeowners who will start their own families in these homes, who will bring their families to this community and send their children to the schools in the neighborhood? And how do we ensure that all of that happens in a neighborhood where people are really interested in getting to know their neighbors and becoming part of a network? That's a very difficult thing to measure. But I'll tell you this, I feel it when I walk down the street because, for instance, on James P. Brawley Drive, which is a really important street that goes through English Avenue, through Vine City, and then ends at Clark Atlanta's campus. We have acquired, dozens of properties on that street alone and been very focused on getting those properties, single family homes redeveloped, getting the apartment buildings redeveloped and populated. And so you can walk down that street and see new homeowner, legacy homeowner, new homeowner, apartment building that was once vacant that now has kids running around the courtyard with their scooters and their ride-on toys. Seeing all of that, I think, really tells us that we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I was asked recently about a mixed income community and were we turning it around? And I said, I drove through it the other day and the amount of Halloween decorations I saw on the patios made me know that these residents were saying, this is my home, my children live here, and they're going to stay in this school. And it's those little things that a number won't show, but you can tell as you walk through a community that it's becoming that interwoven fabric in a community.
Absolutely. It's funny that you said that because on Halloween night, I got a video on my phone from one of my coworkers who had stopped by to visit some of our homeowners that on a block we did near Katherine Johnston Memorial Park. And she was sending me a video of all these kids trick-or-treating. It just felt really great to see that these neighborhoods really are holding life and supporting growth. It was just awesome.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the future vision as we, hit your 10-year mark. And again, looking through all the work and the progress, what's your hope as you look ahead? What are any upcoming projects or long-term goals that you think will really shape the future of the community?
Well, first and foremost, my hope is that we are able to raise the philanthropy that we need to leverage our impact fund and our property holdings to build out all of the properties that we have in our pipeline. That is like first and foremost in terms of getting to, the future state. Our current campaign is called Our Next Chapter. And we also talk internally about our next chapter, right? What happens when that work is done, right? Understanding that it's not really done. It's never done, right? That's one target that we hit. That's a goal that we have. And then when we get there, what comes next? I think if you're not thinking about that way, you are just not honoring the work that you're doing today, right? So, for us, getting through that hurdle of that fundraising goal, getting those 250 single family homes built, ensuring that those 800 units at 60% AMI are created or financed or developed or financed by us. That's the first step. But then envisioning how do we continue to respond to the community's priorities? What are those likely to be? And how can we support that? So probably that looks like continued homeownership work, right? Because we know a few things. We know that a full neighborhood is a safe neighborhood. We know that the fuller schools are, and the more diverse range of socioeconomics that play in that school, the better the outcomes are for everybody, all of the kids, right? And then just having people in that kind of mixed income neighborhood seeing each other is beneficial to the kids who are seeing people, who are, going to work wearing nice suits. It is bringing it back to what it was in the 1950s and the 60s. So I definitely think that whatever happens in the future is something that we are going to think through in connection with the community, and also something that will only continue to build on the work that we and others have been doing.
So what's the advice you would give some similar communities facing similar housing, displacement issues? The lessons that you said, hey, I learned this and maybe I learned it the hard way, and I want to make sure that other communities that have similar goals don't have to learn it the hard way.
Right. It's funny that you say that, because we were just hosting a group from Tulsa earlier this week who have a similar neighborhood condition, and they're really trying to think through how do we all come together under the same sort of mission and drive this neighborhood development effort forward. It's not easy. It really does require a tremendous amount of work and, stick-to-itiveness from a bunch of different groups. I think first and foremost, trust building is incredibly important. So I was telling you about, the community engagement, that we did in connection with the Westside Land Use Framework Plan. But even before that, we had started the Transform Westside Summit, which, is for the first 8 or so years. It occurred on the first and third Friday of every month at 7:15 until 9 a.m. in the morning. Always free Chick-fil-A breakfast, welcoming community residents, stakeholders, policy leaders and advocates, elected officials, and just interested citizens to see what was happening, because getting people in the same room and seeing each other again and again and continuing to show up, that is really laying the foundation for a successful, revitalization, because it asks everybody to be part of it. And it says, we think that we can all do this together, and we know each other's names, and we say hello to each other, and we see each other in meetings, and we see each other eating chicken sandwiches at 7:15 together in the morning. It's something that, I really treasure, as being part of the Westside Future Fund, is having a space and a place to build those relationships. So that's the first thing to do, is don't come in trying to immediately, force your agenda or anything like that. Be in the place, be part of it. And then I think going from there, naturally you will come to understand sort of what the priorities and the needs are. And that's where we started from, was that listening component. And then hopefully laying a groundwork so that you can call on partners, and so that both your stakeholders and partners, they see you doing what you said you were going to do. So you keep doing what you said you were going to do, deliver the results that you said you were going to deliver. and have a kind of a collective impact approach to it. Because like I said, no one party can do it all by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't happen overnight. And I really believe in the root of what you started with about trust. Consistency is how you build that trust and showing up, because there's no reason if off the street you tell somebody, I'm going to do this for you, why believe? But if they keep showing up and you keep showing up and then they keep showing up, and that's really how it ends up in the long run. So it's definitely a long, long game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your insights and the impactful work being done at the Westside Future Fund. Your dedication to creating affordable housing and stabilizing communities is truly inspiring.
Thank you.
Well, Shannon, your conversation with Rachel did it. You did it. That conversation really landed.
Yeah, for me, it was how Rachel held space for the truth and possibility. She didn't sugarcoat or pressure wash the West Side, the pressure the West Side is under, but she also didn't surrender to it.
Yeah, there's a thought that came to mind for me. The West Side means so much to so many people, and it has its own long history. So for those people, the West Side isn't just about geography. It's memory, it's struggle, it's resilience. It's in need of restoration, or, let's say restoration, because it used to be something and it's being brought back.
Absolutely. It was really hopeful to see about her refusal to treat legacy residents as collateral damage and to recognize their position in the community as they move it forward.
It's easy to get caught up in strategy discussions, but she didn't go into that. She didn't fall into that trap. In fact, what she offered was more than a strategy. For her, it was like a blueprint, going back to what you just said, where it was about honoring the legacy that is so deeply rooted in the West Side, and at the same time still pushing forward.
Yeah, it really resonated with me because it's so much of what we do here about building communities of choice. So for her model to be about where staying is a choice, not just a necessity, that it's just great to see other agencies, other communities, all interlaying, thinking about how we create communities of choice.
So you said that resonated with you. Was that what most resonated with you in that dialogue?
Yeah, I think that it's that kind of agency, that what equity in development should look like.
Okay. I can get that. In fact, she said something else that stayed with me. She said, we want to give people a reason to stay because, if you think about it, in all these communities, everybody's trying to find a reason to leave. They can't wait to leave. As soon as their fortunes get to a certain place, it means I'm out of here. And she was very distinctly saying, we want to give people a reason to stay here.
Yeah, absolutely felt like was what it looks like to lead with intention and just appreciate what that means to those people in those communities.
Yes. And given what we do, I couldn't agree with you more because that wasn't just a goal. It was a shift in how many people think about development. It's about the people. Most people tend to think about the buildings, the projects, the various things that are being done that have this discrete window. But for that conversation and what y'all were talking about, it was more about the people and not the projects.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that Rachel and her team aren't trying to freeze a neighborhood in time, but really grow it and do it in a way that honors the soul. I mean, when you think of the history of the West Side and where it was left to how they're going to look for the forward and still honor that, it's really encouraging.
Yeah, it was. In fact, it was a struggle between growth with equity, balancing growth with equity. And that was a point she made. I don't know what you took away from that approach, but it's a little bit different. I mean, we live in that space again, right? And so we kind of know what that is. But what did you take away from her approach to balancing growth with equity, and how can we ensure that progress doesn't come at the expense of the very communities that we claim we're serving, that the communities we're supposed to be serving?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredibly hard line to walk, especially when market forces are moving so fast. So I think it goes back to being intentional, to saying, what are we willing to do versus what are we not willing to sacrifice?
Yeah. You remember that story of the elderly couple on the verge of being displaced? And then through the efforts from Westside Future Fund and the support they provided, that was able to help stabilize them. And that brought the whole policy conversation down to where it matters most, that is with people, right?
Absolutely. It's a complete combination of policy, patience, and proximity. The Westside Future Fund isn't just writing checks. There's a lot of big people that write checks, but they're showing up. They're door to door, block by block, family by family. And we're honored as Integral Property Management to be a part of that.
Yeah, and in fact, I guess I would say over 30 years plus, we know that this isn't theory. It's actually people's lives, their homes, their dignity, their sense of self and self-respect.
It's that kind of embeddedness that makes the model overall durable.
Okay, so take that on. From where you sit, what makes this model something that can be replicated elsewhere? I mean, what are the core ingredients you think that makes it work?
Well, it's really about people, right? So it's not flashy, but it's effective. If other cities are serious about replication, that's where they have to start, on the ground, listening, close to the people, thinking about what that intent is for the community.
So do you think that we're actually measuring the things that matter? Rachel made that critical point. If we want to create just outcomes, then we have to actually start measuring what actually matters. Do you think we're doing that? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, I have to agree with Rachel that it starts about what we choose to count. We understand that people outside of what we do in community development, they want to see numbers. They want to see dashboards that are built with tracking units delivered, dollars invested. But what we really need to be quantifying is life stabilized, histories preserved, because that kind of investment is what has real impact over time. And that's what stabilizes communities.
So perhaps said another way, you're saying keeping legacy residents in place. And obviously, that's one of the important metrics because that's what stabilization or neighborhood stability looks like. But that rarely shows up, not rarely, but rarely shows up in the dashboards, right? But you're saying it should.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the metrics that matter the most. If we just want outcomes, we have to build systems that can see them. So recognizing that those things aren't necessarily straight flat line numbers that are quantified, how do we build the systems that can see them, that can recognize them, and really celebrate them?
Okay, Shannon. So I'm hearing you say, said another way or in my own words, stability is success and belonging is success. And that's what actually creates enduring places, because people who are front and center, if you place them front and center, will be the backbone and life of that community over time, right?
That's exactly right. That's how we rewrite the story of what success looks like in our cities. It has to be people front and center and invested in the communities they live in, the communities of choice.
Okay, thank you. So I'll pose just a rhetorical question. The question is, how do we begin to shift the narrative so that these human outcomes, who gets to stay, who gets to thrive, etc., are treated as benchmark for progress and not just footnotes? And so with that rhetorical question, I would say your conversation with Rachel was deep. It was important, an important message. It was insightful, and it was well said. we can't talk about building equitable cities without first asking, equitable for whom? And Rachel reminded us that protection, participation, and pride aren't extras. They're essential. They have to be built into the planning process from the start. So Shannon, thank you so much for guiding such an important conversation. And deep thanks to Rachel and her team for showing what it means to do this work with integrity and intention. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next time on Create the Village.
If you're a leading hospital and you build workforce housing on your land right there, walking distance from your hospital, of course you're going to recruit more nurses than somebody who's not.
Create the Village is produced by Felicia Ann Rosennuha and Chantrell Brewer. Executive producer Rick White. It's edited by Brennan Robinson. Create the Village is a production of the Integral Group LLC, copyright 2025.